How did this couple retire at 43 to travel the world? At the age of 28, Robert and Robin had student loan debt, car loans, an income of $14,000 per year, and only had $16.88 to their name. Robert couldn't see how he could work another 30 years being miserable at a job, and during this lowest moment, he set out to retire early at the age of 55. But as Robert and Robin got momentum going, they retired much earlier at the age of 43 with $926,000 in their nest egg after investing for 15 years during the period of 1992 to 2006. They averaged $89,000 per year in combined salaries and never got rich quick through any inheritances nor investment schemes, but rather they did it through hard work and consistency, and as you will see, their formula can be replicated. This is the story of how two normal people became near millionaires and retired in their 40s to travel the world. By the time they retired, they had $926,000 in their nest egg, consisting of $342,000 in contributions, $284,000 in compounding, and $300,000 in home equity. But early on, things weren't looking so rosy for them, because halfway through the 15 years, they actually averaged only $55,000 salary per year and had only about $70,000 saved up. At this point, they realized that if they wanted to retire early, they would need to increase their income. Robin was working as a travel agent, making $14,000 per year. However, faced with the realization that her job was becoming obsolete because of online booking sites, she decided to invest in herself. She ultimately chose to become a nurse because she liked the idea of helping others. There was widespread job availability, and she could never be replaced by a computer. But she was also smart and picked a nursing degree that would only require her 1.5 years away from the workforce to retrain, and while the degree cost her $20,000, which they had to borrow, she ended up increasing her salary from $14,000 as a travel agent to over $50,000 as a nurse. Robert, on the other hand, had a master's degree in English, and initially he had a string of failed career attempts from trying to be an English professor to ultimately being a temp worker. However, motivated by the goal of early retirement, he worked harder and became more efficient, and he was able to go from a temp worker earning $7 an hour to a proposal coordinator for an aerospace company earning $90,000 per year. So, from earning $38,000 in year 1 to earning $143,000 in year 15, they averaged only $89,000 per year during this period, showing that you don't necessarily need a high salary to become wealthy and to save for retirement. So how much of their income did they save annually? During the 15 years, they averaged a savings rate of approximately 42%. Of note, during their 15 years, they started only saving 1% of their incomes, but steadily increased it all the way up to 57%. One key that allowed them to increase their savings rate is that they always kept their expenses the same, even as their salary grew. But how did they know how much money they would need in retirement? To calculate an annual amount needed in retirement, they recommend starting with your current income, subtracting out expenses you'll no longer need in retirement, and adding back in expenses that you will need. Let's assume your current income is $100,000. Subtract out things such as higher federal and state taxes, annual mortgage payments, kids' college fund expenses, and subtract out the annual retirement investments you've been making, but then add back in things like inflation, 10% in income taxes, and add back in $1,000 per year for health insurance. And thus, you might get a number such as $56,000 per year. And then take that number, multiply it by 25, and that should be your goal to accumulate before you retire. So what does one invest in to obtain this number? Well, they invested their money into index funds. They preferred index funds because of their built-in diversification, their better performance over the long run versus actively managed funds, their tax efficiency, their simplicity, and their ease of use and accessibility. But what was their asset allocation? In order to take advantage of growth and to hedge against inflation, they had 100% stock index allocation during their 15-year investment period. They divided the indexes via the Vanguard S&P Index Fund, Extended Market Fund, and Total International Stock Index Fund. However, when they retired, they shifted to a 70-30 stock-to-bond allocation. And what about 401ks and Roth IRAs? While they also contributed to their 401ks and Roth IRAs for the tax advantages, they also realized that they would need a separate taxable account that they could access before the age of 59 and a half. While the 401k and Roth IRA are growing for an essential second retirement. When they retired, they had 2/3 of their nest egg in taxable accounts and 1/3 in tax advantage accounts. By 2007, they were ready to retire. This meant that they retired right into the Great Recession. How did they survive this? In 2007, their net worth stood at $926,000, but during the depths of the Great Recession, it had fallen all the way down to $682,000. However, they were able to weather the storm in two ways. First, they attributed their bond holdings as an important factor in smoothing out the ride because as stocks were falling, their bond position actually increased. Second, Robert was offered a part-time consulting job near his house, and the income from this job meant that they didn't have to draw from their nest egg as it was falling. So, by 2010, their net worth had recovered back up to $880,000, and by 2012, it had recovered back up to $926,000 where they started. And they were able to survive the Great Recession. Eventually, Robert and Robin set off into the sunset to a life of extended travel, and they have no regrets. So far, they have visited over 84 countries, and they have pushed their personal limits. They have skydived, bungee jumped, hang glided, jet boated, swam with dolphins and seals, snorkeled with sharks and manta rays, romped with lion cubs, rolled down hills, and kayaked and hiked. Eventually, they bought a $100,000 home in Colorado to take breaks in between their trips. And despite the fact that they haven't contributed anything to their nest egg, it has grown from $926,000 in 2007 to $1.5 million in 2021. This occurred all while withdrawing 3 to 4% and living off $40,000 per year. So what financial advice would the Charltons give to aspiring early retirees? Don't wait, get started now, even if it's just a small amount per month. Get in the habit of investing regularly, then increase that amount as your salary increases. Pick a reliable company like Vanguard and open both a taxable account and a Roth IRA. That, combined with your 401k, if available, should be all that you need. Populate these accounts with an Index 500 fund, and that would be a solid start. So, from this story, we should be inspired because anybody with a normal job can save for retirement and not only retire, but retire early and travel the world. So if you like this video, check out this one about a millennial who retired in her 30s, and don't forget to leave a like and subscribe, it's completely free. And this has been the Tin Man at TinManFIRE, and we'll see you next time.